Oh, yeah, looks like we are.
All right, good. All righty. Well, welcome everybody who's watching this, or if you're seeing the recording. We're excited today, the last day of the Colby convention, and we were able to we maybe you might have seen some emails, but hopefully you're familiar with the logo, especially if you're watching this. Our new logo that was created by Chris Lewis of Baritus Catholic. And Baritus is a Latin word. We're all saying Baritus. Do you say it Baratus or?
No, I think you've got it right. If I have my Latin down to that degree, that sounds right.
Good. Yeah.
Baritus.
So how did you? I wanted to ask. I guess let's start there. How did you come up with the name Baritus?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I had been in marketing for close to 17 years at that. No, 15 to 17 years, somewhere in there at that point. And during that period, I had always worked on developing new brands and coming up with names. And I can tell you, it's like one of the most difficult things to do. Everybody's, words that you would just go to naturally. It just seems like everybody's already taken them. So, immediately being Catholic, I'm blessed to have a whole nother category of a language to pull from.
Mm.
And it needed to be something that was that tied into the Bible, that was a strong word, and it had a meaning that was deeper than just a label. So I love that because I read a lot of history, and especially about the ancient Roman Empire. And so when I came across this word Baritus, it just stuck because it reflected this imagery of ancient Christianity or the ancient world, but then it also kind of had connotations to the Old Testament. Like so I guess I should tell you what it means. It means either a trumpet blast or like the sound of an elephant. And so it was used as a war cry. So it has these connotations of like a trumpet blast that sounds like an elephant, used as a war cry. And it kind of made me think about the Old Testament and the fall of Jericho, and Joshua like blowing the trumpets, or the angel at the end of times who blows the trumpet. And so it just immediately resonated with me. And I knew people wouldn't get it because it is a little bit rare, but so I started tagging it with Catholic illustrations so that people would understand this is definitely a Catholic project. And yeah, that's kind of how it came to fruition.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching this, we're not in the same house. We were joking about this on
Yeah.
camera just a bit ago. It looks like we're in the same place, but similar,
He's right
similar.
over here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Baritus, I know they used that also. Yeah, so like the war cry idea, especially from the Germans when they were
Mhm.
fighting against the Romans.
Yeah.
And it's funny. There's another word which is ululatus, which is where we get the word owl, and it's like it literally means a screech. And so
Oh yeah.
I'm glad you didn't use that one. I think
Yeah.
Baritus is a lot better.
Yeah. Although I love owls, so that's kind of cool. But yeah,
Yeah,
that doesn't have the same ring to it.
it doesn't, right? Yeah. So you seem. Oh, and by the way, you can see on his website there's a little more explanation about his own logo and how that ties in. I love the biblical themes that you use in there, and in the explanation as well. You're a convert to Catholicism. Were you raised as a Protestant, evangelical, or something? Or
Yeah, very loosely. I mean, growing up, we would have considered ourselves Christian. We wouldn't have known the word fundamentalist, but in all purposes, the way we practiced, we were fundamentalist. We said the Jesus prayer. That was our entrance into the church, essentially, and into this life with Christ, which is the prayer that if you accept, when you accept Jesus into your heart as your Lord and Savior, you're essentially beginning that process as a Christian. And we had the Bible, but I'll be honest, like we didn't have like a real practice in our home of making it like the core of our life. So we talked about it sometimes. We definitely did not act like it within our house, and so um, that the little bit I gained from it was a positive. I gained a huge respect for the Old Testament. But I couldn't have told you much about what Christianity was, um, how it applied to my life today. Couldn't have told you where the Bible came from, but we would have looked at the Bible as something that was authoritative to us. But of course, we would have brought our own interpretation of that to the whole process. And so when I got to the age of being able to question these things, I just found the answers that were provided just they didn't appeal to reason or to the intellect. And I had a lot of reasons to sort of be antagonistic towards Christianity by that point in my life. So I kind of rejected it. And these days there's a term of being a none, an None, where you essentially don't have time for religion, don't question it. It's just kind of not even on the radar. And that's essentially what I fell into. And I really just became a product of the culture. And it was the things that the culture was communicating to me that really was what I led my life around, until that just led me into misery, essentially. So there wasn't a strong enough foundation there for me to really hold to Christianity. I didn't understand it. And the answers that I was looking for just did not get out of that tradition, unfortunately.
Yeah, I share some of that. I mean, I'm also a convert, and my dad is a Baptist pastor, and so
Oh, wow.
we were raised probably in a similar way, except they were very very devout, and I mean, going to church 3 times a week, that sort of thing. So in my own journey, I came into Catholicism by going deeper in the faith that I had started with, sort of. I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's kind
Yeah.
of my entry point. For you, was there kind of, it sounds like maybe there was like a break and then a return to something brand new. Can you tell us about how you came to become Catholic?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, brand new is, I mean, that's what it was. It was when I discovered Catholicism, this was revolutionary to me. So it connected really all of the dots, all the questions that I had about where the Bible comes from, how we're supposed to read it, how we're supposed to interpret it. I didn't get those answers in my tradition growing up, but I did discover the answers to that in the ever ancient, ever new Catholic Church. And so, yeah, what complicated things was that we were a military family too. So every time we would move, my parents would try and find a new church. And it's interesting. If they would have looked for a church, Catholicism wouldn't have even been an option. We that was kind of compartmentalized along with like Jehovah's Witnesses, and we would have thought it was like something like way off the spectrum like that. It wasn't until I met my wife uh, at 19 years old, and literally our first date. I didn't. We met online actually. This was back in the days before online dating. That's how old I am. But so when we met for the first time, we had never talked about Christianity or anything, and she said to me, "Well, I have to go to mass." So it's funny, like she didn't really know how to approach that question with me. So she's like, "You can come with me," and then she was like, "Or you can stay home." And I was like, "Well, no, I'll go with you." And so literally our first date was in a Catholic church, and I just have to believe there was grace from that.
Yeah.
But even at that point, it took a long time. I had a series of maybe 3 conversions. I had an intellectual conversion. I had sort of a wrestling with God moment, and then I had just like basically a decade of just researching and reading and just having this insatiable appetite to learn about it. And it was things like asking my mother-in-law, like, okay, I kind of remember John Paul II being, if we didn't pay much attention to him as Protestants, but I was familiar with him, and it made me wonder, well, who was the first pope? And I remember asking her that one day, and she said Saint Peter. And now I hardly knew anything about the Bible, but I knew Saint Peter. We wouldn't call him Saint Peter, but I knew Peter was in the Bible, and I just, that blew me away. I thought, if that's true, how could I have not heard this my entire life? And I need to find out, if that's true, we have a 2,000-year connection here. And that was just an amazing um, door that opened. So it was, this is long-winded, so feel free to cut me off at any time.
No, it's great.
But it was really my being open to the faith, and then just having this intellectual like desire to understand it and to understand what Christianity was about. And I'll just say, to sum it up, I mean, when I got to the end of that process, Christianity looked pretty much nothing like the Christianity that I had understood as a youth. And so the Christianity that I found was reasonable, it was historical, it was inspirational, it was beautiful, and it appealed to every aspect of my life. And that's one of those things that it's like, now as Catholic parents and with 5 little ones, we build our entire life around it, and it's something that we can actually live. It's not just like something we do on Sundays, It's actually a participation every single day in the way we live our life and um, how we interact as part of the church militant, essentially.
Man, that's so great. It's amazing this like people in our generation, seeing people that get excited by the faith, and it's like we're introduced into something that we didn't get. I've had students say to me, there are cradle Catholics. They're kind of like, I wish that I had had a conversion experience like yours, because then maybe it would be my own thing or more meaningful. And I'm always thinking, I'm the exact opposite. You don't know how lucky you are that you were and blessed. And it's funny, those a lot of the assumptions that you have, like not knowing that Peter was a big deal and that kind of thing. I had a lot of that with the Bible, like with the idea, I just when I first realized, wait, there was a church before there was a New Testament.
Right.
Blew my mind. And it's so obvious, even just with a superficial look at the history of the time, you should be able to put that together.
Yeah, and I was not the smartest student as a youth. I mean, I was lacking in my understanding of history, but it's interesting now as Catholics, like we have the church fathers, so we can and all Christians have the church fathers. I mean, essentially, this is something all Christians should be looking at. Don't you want to understand how Christianity was actually lived and practiced outside of the Bible? And so when you do, and you start to read things like from Saint Augustine, who says, I would not believe the scriptures if it were not for the Catholic Church. And you read something like that, and it's like, that's a nail in the coffin, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot more you can build around that, but it's at least something that proves the fact that when Christ went and sent his apostles, he never taught them to write. And it wouldn't have made sense for 1,500 years anyway for anybody to write, but he went and taught them to teach. And so it makes logical sense that the scriptures were part of that teaching tradition, but they were not the whole picture. And so when things like that were just unbelievable to me, and it really set me on fire, and I just felt like I had to tell everybody. I wanted to tell my whole family. I wanted to tell like anybody who would listen. I was like, but do you understand this stuff is there? You have to look into it. Because like you, I run into cradle Catholics and I'm like, you don't know what you have.
Yeah.
And to see I run into a lot of young Catholics through my business who reach out to me, and I'm just so inspired by them, because what a blessing to like know what you have at that age and to be able to make the most of it at that young age. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about your company then, because you have now, it looks like that you are fully immersed in doing this kind of work. How did that? So it's a kind of a recent transition, I guess. It looks like. How did that come about?
Yeah, it is. So I went into graphic design as a professional career, and I did that for 17 years until I decided to I just felt like God was pushing it, like the things were just lining up. It was there was providence there, and I was seeing God's hand just moving in my life and pushing me towards this direction. And I just thought, COVID was sort of there was a silver lining there, and it was sort of like, this is a moment in life where I need to make a drastic decision. It had kind of flipped everything upside down with work and with life, and it just seemed like if I wasn't going to do it now, I wasn't going to do it. And so I just made that decision to leave the secular corporate design world and just devote my energies to this Catholic work full time. And I didn't even see this business coming to fruition. It happened, it snowballed. And by the time like I got a minute to sit here and look at everything, I'm like, there's a business here. But it literally started with me at my day job, during lunch or late in the afternoons when things slowed down. I'd be working on a design project, and I was just so moved by the faith. And the Sacred Heart was the first thing I drew. And I just, in the sidelines of one of my projects, I just started drawing. And I thought, I haven't drawn in like 15 years. Like, I love this. This is like peaceful. And so I started coming home at night and just doing it just to find some peace and to actually just, it was a part of my faith. I love this stuff so much, and I was actually finding myself really drawn to drawing these subjects and these themes. And I thought, I'll just start an Instagram account, and maybe 10 people will catch on to it. I can throw some pictures up. It'll encourage me to keep going. And I mean, from there, it just exploded. Within 2 years, I was able to say, okay, if I take that time from my regular work and I put it into this, I think there's something here. And and I love it because not only do I get to do something I love, but I get to just it's connected me to Catholics throughout the world, and it's helped me to really create products that I think are meaningful and to really push something that I think is important, and that's beauty. And I really have a passion as a convert, I think, for just exposing people to the beauty of the faith, and art is a great way to do it. So that's where the fire comes from.
Yeah, if you haven't gone to the website and you're watching this, you should check it out. So Veratus, is it just VeratusCatholic.com? Is that the website?
Yes, barituscatholic.com. I apologize, it's a little bit outdated. I have a lot of I keep up with Instagram and Facebook a little bit more frequently, so you can see new work there as well.
Yeah, follow him on those platforms if you haven't yet, and check out the art. What I like so much about it, what I think is so cool, is it's this idea. I like everything that hits this like the spectrum where it looks old and it looks new, and
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. It looks like it's. I mean, so it's showing the tradition, but it's showing the future in a way, because I've never seen Catholic art that looks like your art. And so is it just your style, or are you going for something that you've seen elsewhere?
Yeah, it's interesting. So years ago, when I was sort of having a more of a strong conversion experience, I sat down and I thought, I'm going to try and be a Catholic artist. I mean, this was before I started Baritus. And it's kind of funny. I had been so out of practice drawing that, I would sit down to try and draw Jesus, and it's like I just couldn't get it. It just wouldn't. Like, I'm looking at these paintings of the Renaissance, and I'm like, I can't do that. I mean, that's amazing. These, you look at a Caravaggio, and it's like Jesus is real. And so it was a long period of me like struggling to do something that was not natural for me. And I finally got burnt out, and I was like, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. And then one day, like I said, I was sitting there at work, and I had sort of developed this style, building some brands with the company I was working with. So I was doing some secular consumer type product design and things like that. And they needed illustration work. And so I was doing some of this, and I kind of developed the style just based on some of the things that I had liked, woodcut carvings back from the old printing press days, or Gustave Doré's etchings and things like that. And statuary as well, like Bernini and other statue creators were really like, they became more of my influences than painting, in a way. And so my style, I seem to look at these and take this more modern, I was doing this basically in a design software. I was drawing in design software for logos, and I just started doing it because it was natural. And it kind of took on this almost like statue look to it and then I realized, well, hey, I can do some like wood cut techniques with this. And I just kind of merged all three of these areas that really appealed to me. And just the fact that it was digital, I had not been a digital artist in the past. I had always done everything by hand. It was just sort of out of necessity of me being stuck at my desk at work, and that was the only thing I had, a few minutes to doodle in. And so, yeah, it just, and so as soon as I did that, and once everything aligned with just a reversion, really, I went through a kind of a hard period, and then had a really strong spiritual conversion for the first time. And I feel like when the spiritual conversion and my art sort of converged, it just, I wasn't forcing it anymore. It just came out, and so I let it be.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, that's why it looks so inspiring to us. If the artist is inspired, you get that. I mean, I love this. I love this quote that Seneca has. I'll send it to you later on, because I think it's
Okay.
so, because he uses the artist as an example of saying it's better to be painting than to have painted. So he's talking about like being in the act of creating, and that's what gets, I think, true artists, true writers, things like people, woodworkers, whatever. They love doing the thing. And so, could you tell us a bit about what is your day like? I mean, what do you do each day?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a lot of people message me from time to time about this, and they'll say, well, how do I get started? How do I do something like this? And it's difficult. There's a term for artists who are sitting there looking at a piece of paper and have nothing. It's just like nothing's coming. It's the great white fear or something like that. And it's essentially looking at a blank paper and you just cannot make yourself do it. And one of the things I've learned is that I can sit down and try and force something, but when I do that, it's just not going to be as authentic, and it doesn't carry the same appeal. I think it just doesn't happen naturally. And so I've gotten to the point where I've taken a change in my approach, and I've stopped trying to force things when it's not working, and I just step away and I go get inspired by other things. I spend time with the kids. I'll go to mass. I'll look at a art book. I'll read history. I'll do these other things that just kind of help recharge the brain. And then when I sit down, keep it. One of the things I tell people is just draw every day. Take 15 minutes, and it's more of just a practice. If you just sit down for 15 minutes and just start sketching something, it's amazing what that opens up. It just shifts your brain into a different mode, and it just becomes really easy to kind of like free form draw, and eventually that snowballs into something, and hopefully it's something great. But the more you do that and the more you just keep at it, and that's what I do. So when I wake up in the day, I've got a list of projects to do, and sometimes I'm a little bit more motivated on some than others. And I always lead by follow my inspiration. So I'll go with those, and eventually by the time I get back to something, maybe another idea has occurred to me. But things have been, it's interesting because I do commission work, but I've also established like this retail part of the business too, which my wife and daughter and even my son have kind of chipped in to really help there because it's expanded so much. And so they run that side of it. But it's always been very important for me that when somebody supported my work or when they reach out to ask me questions, like I want to speak to these people. Like I don't want to just let their comments go unnoticed. So I try and answer anybody that messages me. So that's a part of my day. And then just being creative is a part of my day. And then I have to take time for a break just to recharge. And so, yeah, I mean, day to day, it varies. It all depends on the work. The amount of work and the types of work I do are so versatile that, I mean, that's one of the things I've loved about this is that the Catholic world has so much of a need for art, and they need it all for all kinds of different reasons. And so it's great to sort of to put a foot in all these different areas of the Catholic world.
Yeah, definitely. I have some thoughts about that. But one thing I wanted to see if you could explain, because we're seeing the logo everywhere now, on all our social media, our podcast, all of that. We have the Max and Mary logo that you created. It's going to start being on a lot of our printed material, all of that. So I think people would be interested to hear the story behind that. How did you come up with exactly what you finished with on that one?
Yeah, interesting. So when Colby first approached me, you all had been using, I think it's like public domain, just a painting from, I don't know, 100 years ago, 200 years ago of Max and Colby, and you had all been using that on your books. And I was approached to sort of refresh that and bring it up to date in line with my style. And so, which was a huge blessing because it's one of the things I have a little bit of a deficit in my knowledge of the saints, but Maximilian Kolbe's one that you just read and it just immediately sticks in your head. Like that is a story you do not forget. Yeah. And I think that's why he's such a powerful saint for people and why there's so much interest in him being a patron. So I was very moved by that story, and there's almost like a somber humility, fidelity, like just everything mixed together. And I sort of have a melancholic personality, so like this really appealed to me. And I just thought about Mary almost in a way not being sad, but just knowing that what humans do to humans and what it takes to overcome that. And she knew that Maximilian Kolbe was somebody who could overcome it. And you see the example of the story of him just being in love with our Blessed Mother, in love with Christ, and just willing to do what he needed to do to get those two crowns of glory, or to accept those two crowns of glory, I should say. And so the way I juxtaposed it was Mary, holding the crown of purity, but almost like saying, but this one will come too. And so I wanted it to be something that was very faithful and show the piety of St. Maximilian Kolbe. So of course he's devoted to his rosary, and that's where he's getting his strength, and he's kind of tucked into Mary's chest, and just she's almost caring for him like a child, as she does. And so that was really the motivation behind it. And I loved working on that piece. And I think, and it's, I'm so happy that I was able to do that with Colby, and that Colby's happy with it. And yeah, it's a blessing.
What goes in? So if somebody commissions a piece from you and you don't know much about that saint, what do you do? How do you go about drawing that then?
Yeah, that's a great way to learn about the saints. Is I whenever I get approached with a subject that I might not be as familiar with, I always do research on it, and that's the first step really in any project. Is I'll do research, and I'll look into the stories, and I'll look into the writings, and look at other images that have been done, and just try and get an overall picture of who this person was. You know, it's interesting as Catholics, like, these are living people. They're more alive than us, as the Bible says. And so yeah, it's interesting when you read these stories, they sound so heroic and fantastic, but then you remember, like, these are real people. And so it's always important to get those stories right, because it's a life that was lived, and it's a life that's inspiring. And so yeah, I'll try and research it as I can. I've got a ton of saint books, and so I make that a priority to at least brush up on them as I can.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, Maximilian Kolbe, because he was not that long ago. I mean, our grandparents were around at that time, and it I've always loved that about Kolbe in general, that connection to him, and that we took him as our patron before he was canonized. So he was in the
Oh, is that right?
process, almost there, but it's like this someone for the future. You know, he's the patron of our difficult age.
Sure. Yeah.
It's I was yeah, I was wondering if you feel, and you must. I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't. Do you feel a closer connection to those that you've painted or
Yeah.
drawn?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just talking about this on Instagram the other day. When I came into the church, it's kind of a funny story, but I came into the church that was named the Little Flower, and you know, as I was, I didn't know what that meant coming into the church. I didn't know what the little flower was, and for the longest time, there was an image of the little flower up above the altar at that parish. And I remember when I got married, you know, a lot of my Protestant family came, and after the wedding, I said to my wife, what I wonder what my family thought about that. I mean, they were just staring at Mary placed above the crucifix for an hour and a half, and she looked at me and said, "Well, that's not Mary. That's the little flower. That's Saint Therese," and I had no
Oh,
clue. And
oh,
so, um, ever since then, coming into that church of the Little Flower, there's been like this relationship that I don't even understand it completely, but it's like she seems to pop up everywhere in my life. And I've always loved the heroic saints like Saint Joan of Arc, and so that she naturally became a favorite for me. And I just recently learned that Saint Therese has this very strong devotion to, or had a very strong devotion to Saint Joan, and it just blew me away, because for whatever reason, these two saints keep popping up in my life, and it's almost like they're with me on this journey and looking out for me. And it's kind of the same thing with Colby. Like, for whatever reason, I read his story years ago, and it really stuck with me, and it seems to be the saint that just keeps coming back. I mean, this is a great example with Colby Academy. um, it's interesting. I just, out of curiosity, I was wondering, I wonder what the closest Catholic church to where I was born was named. And I went and looked it up, and it was St. Aloysius Gonzaga. I'd never heard of St. Aloysius. And I thought, well, that's a strange name. And I went and I looked at the translation of St. Aloysius, and it's Lewis. So he essentially has my name. And so, you know, these types of things happen all the time. And it's these saints that for whatever reason, it's the same saints that just keep coming back. And I really feel a closeness to them. And you know what? I was talking for so long. I don't remember if I answered your question, but
yeah. No, I was asking about the closeness to the saints,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's because it's a strange thing from the outside. Before you're a Catholic, it's a strange thing to see devotion to these saints that are not in the Bible.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. It's amazing the way that these connections. For me, it happened a lot in Germany with specific places there and things, and for my wife as well. And so, but to come back to the U.S. and be here at Colby and meet all these students, and they all have these interesting stories about
Mhm.
what their saint name is, those, or who they're devoted to, different things like that. That I think, I mean, you said, I mean, it's the fullness of the faith. So we can really bring in, and we can bring in things that I guess a perspective that that is still somewhat foreign, and it sort of converts over time even more so. And I'm a lot. I think I'm a lot more quiet about things than I was when I was a new convert in a way.
Yeah.
Because but that I guess that's the piece of your artwork that I find it hits the mark exactly, because it's sort of, it's bold in a way, but it's very traditional. Like, it's very respectful, very traditional, and I think other people must tap into that also.
You're hitting on something there that is a big thing for me. And this is interesting. If you go back and you look at post-Reformation, like, the church was in a place where they had an opportunity to really or to build up the church again, and to really encourage these devotions to the Eucharist and things like that. And so you see at that time, there was this whole new emphasis put on how they were designing churches. And it's part of that we still experience today. As you walk into the church, you're almost on this linear journey, and at the end of the journey you find Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, and it's there at the altar. And it's like and so churches were intentionally brought to just pull us there. And so there's a purpose to that. And so what you're saying about, you find yourself being quieter but moved by art, this has become my realization as well. A large part of my conversion happened silently. It was from walking into my mother-in-law's house, and for growing up, we didn't have religious images up in the house. So I walked into her house, and it was just covered wall to wall. There was a religious image in every room, and it forces you to encounter it. It forces you to experience it, and it engages you. And so, and there's a note for anybody: put a religious piece of art in every single room of your house. It makes such a difference over the years, and I believe that's partly what's led to my big conversion. So that's become an important thing for me too, and especially in this day of social media, where everybody's just arguing, and they're just assuming the worst about the other person on the other side of the screen, and my idea is right, and nobody understands what anybody's saying. I don't want to go there. I would rather create beautiful work that speaks of God without saying a word. So I want people to just look at the beauty of the faith, and to feel it deeply, and not have to argue with it. And because you can't argue with an image. So you walk in. I've heard these stories of I've heard a guy on he was on Journey Home one time, and I think, if I remember the story correctly, he just walked into the Catholic Church, in some church in Rome, for the first time in his life, and he was instantly converted by the beauty. I mean, how powerful is that? It's one of the transcendentals, and it speaks highly of God. So
yeah, I relate to that totally. And even seeing some of those churches when I was in Europe, and just being blown away by what we have. One of the things that I worry about, even in my own realm, in liberal arts college and things like that, is that we only look to the past. We feel like there can't be any. It's like in the art world, I think also there's like this stagnation where nobody knows where to go. There has to be new orchards out there.
yeah.
Not all the low hanging fruit can be consumed, or maybe it is in this particular orchard, but a lot of times I think we're too afraid to sort of go forward and create something new, rooted in the whole tradition. And so what are your thoughts about something like that?
Yeah, that's interesting. There is, in a sense, a timelessness of the ancient works of art of the church. I mean, I can look at something from 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago, and it almost speaks to me outside of time. But on the other hand, I think the problem is that the culture has just changed to such a degree that and I was thinking about this recently. Before I became Catholic, I looked at Renaissance art. I went to art school, and we studied Renaissance art, and it never moved me. And I didn't understand it. And in a way, it was weird, and I couldn't like wrap my head around it. And it was because I didn't have the right language to understand it. I didn't know what the Eucharist was. I didn't know why they were creating these works of art. And so it's one of the things you learn as a Catholic, that all of that work has a purpose. It's all created to draw you into this higher reality. And so I think that's one of the things that's lacking these days. It's like people don't know where to go because we've kind of lost that in society. Now, as Catholics, I would even say to a large degree, catechesis has been pretty bad in the last few decades, and we see that just in the numbers of people falling away. And maybe I'm being maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on art, but I have to believe that some of that is just some of the stripping down of churches that has happened in modern times, and people have kind of lost that connection with the timelessness of the church. And they've lost. We almost need to put the art back in the church for the same reasons that people put art in there to begin with, and that was because the faithful didn't know about the faith. And we almost have to do that again. And I don't know. I do get a sense in just being in the Catholic world through this project now for just over 2 years that and speaking with other artists, there is something of a renaissance happening. And it's not at the scale of the Renaissance, but I think people want it and they desire it. And what's happening right now is there's a dividing line where people are falling harder into their faith or they're falling away completely. There is no lukewarmness anymore. People are choosing one path or the other. And I think the people going into the hard line of really putting, doubling down on their faith are saying, no, we need more. We need to do more justice to our heritage. And I do get this feeling that there is something will happen. It'll take time. I'm sure it took time back in the Renaissance too, but I'm hopeful. I see it even locally in my parishes, how things are being done to try and bring art and beauty back into the faith.
Yeah, I loved hearing that you're hopeful, and I am too. I'm being a teacher, getting to be around the young people, and seeing their talent, seeing their devotion, seeing all of that. I feel a lot of hope for the future as well, and I'm glad that we've been able to partner in this way and get your work as something that Colby really features, and it speaks for us, and it's worthy of that for sure. I mean, it's a great stuff. I'm wondering, do you feel like taking any questions, people? If anyone has any questions,
sure. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Well, so if you, I don't know if who's fielding these, but if anyone's interested, you can put in a question while we're talking, and we'll look that up and respond to it. One of the things that I'm sure is a goal of yours is to draw as many different saints as possible, right? And so you don't always know what's coming next, probably, because you take commissions and so I don't know. I guess sometimes if you don't have any commissions, you decide on something yourself. But
yeah, when I get those periods, it's kind of nice because I get to just do whatever comes to me, whatever is moving me at the moment. So yeah, I always say, like, I would love to draw every saint in the church. So it's just a matter of time. I keep praying for 36 hours in my day, and it hasn't happened. So I will suffice with 24, but I just don't know when I'll get to. How many saints are in the church? Many.
yeah.
Many.
And by the time you get to the end, there'll be a bunch more.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's somebody. Oh, here we do have a question here. So, what is your favorite piece of artwork you have created?
My favorite that I've created would probably be. I haven't finished it yet. It's actually a sketch, and I have it on Instagram. It's of Saint Peter. Saint Peter is, I would say, he's probably my favorite saint, just because I seem to relate to him a lot. Just him falling away from Christ, him returning to Christ, him making mistakes and fumbling, but always being just devoted and wanting to do the right thing, but sort of making mistakes along the way. And ultimately he perseveres until the end. And I just find that inspirational, and it kind of speaks to me as well. And so I have an illustration that I really intend to, I hope I can get it done this year, actually, because it's high on my list, is one of him and the various aspects of his figure and his story kind of worked into one composition. And there's a sketch of that early on in my Instagram feed, but that one.
Yeah, so here's another one. Do you put your artwork up in your house? I think I see two behind you.
Yeah, so those actually just went up. I don't really. It's interesting. Like I've got a few that a few pieces of, like I make physical, like, shrines, and I've taken art from other artists and put it in those for those spaces. Yeah, I don't really have my own art up, and I think, as an artist, and I think I've heard this from a lot of artists, we kind of suffer from finishing something and then immediately not liking it. So, and that it doesn't happen to the same degree with Catholic art, because I think there's a meaning there, but just as an artist, we're just hard to please for ourselves.
Do you find like sometimes though you get away from it, you kind of forget about it, you come back to it and you're like, oh, that was pretty good. I'm surprised.
Yeah. Well, what the challenge is as artists, sometimes we have these really high ideals, and we work so hard to accomplish it, but it's almost like our ideas are almost so high, they're almost impossible. And I hear this from other artists as well. Yeah, it's not that I don't like them, it's just that yeah, it's a weird thing to say, I love my own work, but I mean, I do it because I love it, and I do it because it's meaningful.
Yeah. Here, someone else, do you have resources and classes that you can recommend for artists learning to produce woodcut type art digitally?
No, I wish, honestly, it's something that came about by trial and error. And like I said, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about not forcing things too much. Like I had a love for that type of work, and so it sort of came natural as I started experimenting with it. I almost treat my art like sculpture, where I'll draw heavy lines and then kind of just start shaving pieces out of it. So it's just I didn't even consciously think about developing a style like that. It just sort of happened. And I've been out of school for quite a while, so I actually didn't go to art school. I studied graphic design, so I don't know about fine art as much.
Oh, okay. Somebody else, how many children do you have?
5 children. Yeah.
5 children. Wow.
Yeah.
What are their ages?
So we have a baby who's just about to be 1, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 12 or 14. I always got to think about it because everyone's just on the cusp of a birthday. So 13 is the oldest, down to almost 1.
Yeah, that I have 5 also, and that's how I always I'm when people ask their ages, I'm like, I know I'm gonna miss it, so I just go 11 to 2, like, and everything in between.
Bookend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that so do you have any like artists that you model your work after at all?
I actually try not to look at other art, at least contemporary artists. I don't like to be influenced. So I try and generate ideas that come really from history. And so I'll look backwards all the time. I mean, I'm always looking I love 19th century anything. And so I'm always looking at 19th century art. I love statues. My wife and I were quite blessed to be able to go to Europe on many occasions, and I basically went in and like cataloged everything I could find in the churches and photos. And so I try and keep a running file of things that just inspire me, and I'll look through those from time to time, and sometimes it sort of ignites an idea. But as far as like current artists, I see so much great work, and I catch wind of it just by being on social media, but I don't follow anybody too much. I tend to look backwards.
Yeah, I totally relate to that in writing. I don't read very many contemporaries at all. But I mean, sometimes I have to. Something you said in those churches in Europe, where we were living in Germany, there were these really small, tiny churches. And there was a time when I walked in, and it was the same kind of thing, like sort of drawing you forward, like you were talking about before. But when you look, like there was a little enclave on the side, and when we looked there, there was a crucifix hanging there that it had human hair. It looked just like a corpse. That like,
wow.
I jumped when I first saw it. I wrote an article about it. I forget what it's called, but it's online somewhere. But I wrote this article about this corpse Jesus, and how so the people in the little village there for centuries had never seen a picture of Jesus. They've never seen an image, or they've never seen an art rendition of Jesus that was more beautiful than that. And so their Jesus for all these generations of people was this corpse with human hair. hanging down, and man, that was pretty crazy, but really awesome in a way.
That's got to be stunning. I mean, that's got to be something that shocks your senses, and
Yeah.
it probably makes it much more real. You know, we kind of have a tendency in America to clean things up a bit, but you go into some of those older churches and it's pretty gritty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was the point in my article, was exactly that this Jesus, as shocking as it was, would also make Easter that much more meaningful, because you're
right.
seeing a real corpse on the cross, you know.
You know, that's really, I'm just thinking about this off the top of my head as you speak, but I almost wonder if that's how we've kind of shifted into this like nice Jesus, our friend,
Yeah.
and not that reality that, yeah, it's like you said, when you see that, it makes Easter all the more meaningful. That's interesting.
Yeah, the Jesus our friend, and the Jesus my ideal, also,
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
big thing, you know, outside of Catholicism, is this idea that it's my personal Jesus,
right.
the liberation Jesus, the social
Yeah,
justice
yeah.
Jesus. But
Yeah. Yeah. You don't look at that Jesus with in Germany as you're speaking of and say, that's me. I want to be that.
yes,
Like
exactly.
that's a hard cross to bear, literally.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It shows the reality of it in such a graphic. I mean, it was pretty awesome. I could not remember where that was, but I ended up finding an image online, and I was like, man, it's the same as I remember it.
Hey, I would love to read that article. Please send it
Yeah,
to me.
I'll send you a link later. I cannot remember the title of it, but I'll send it to you.
Okay.
We have this other question here about if we wanted to get a piece of artwork commissioned, what is the process like?
Yeah. So right now it's a little bit difficult. I'm booked out pretty far in the year. And then we start to get into Advent and the retail side of this business starts to get pretty busy. But when things are slower, I will take private commissions, and it's just a matter of reaching out to me and giving me a sense of what you're looking for. And yeah, I mean that's essentially it. I'll quote out projects. They're all different. I don't really have a set price. Complexity makes a big difference in cost and time and things like that. So
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
always open to anybody emailing me, messaging me at any time. I mean, I love to meet and talk to Catholics, and so yeah.
yeah. So reach out to him if you and go check him out on social media, Baritus Catholic. Is there anything else you wanted to get across today, Chris? While we're
No, I've enjoyed this, and I just can't tell you enough about how grateful I am to you and Colby and everybody. I mean, it's just it's quite a blessing to even have had Colby you know, come up and me even be on the radar. And I got to thank my friend Ari for that. Ari McBride, if you're out there or even watching. Um, yeah, thank you for that. Another great artist herself. So yeah, I'm very grateful to you all, and hopefully together we can really help you know, keep promoting the church, building the church up, inspiring young people, helping families, and just
yeah,
doing the work we're supposed to do.
definitely. Well, we really appreciate this partnership we've had with you, and I hope that we'll get more of your artwork on our stuff in the coming years. I mean, we'll be working towards something like that. But thank you for taking the time today and coming on here live with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jordan.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, everybody.